it's time for the next Nordic game conversation. This time the focus is on a UK studio with a long and glorious history, Rebellion, entitled How Rebellion Used VR to Bring Further Immersion to the Zombie Army series. Please meet Jordan Woodward from Rebellion and Bobby Tandy from XR Games.
Thank you. Please play the video, Martin.
For mature.
Platz hier. Scheiße. Der Tante. This is occult magic. Only by killing enough of the Horde will you be able to break the seal. My memories of this place are poisoned. My family. I am sorry I failed you.
Help me. That mournful sound. The bell. Something draws the dead to it. Something evil.
Father, I'm here. I'm trapped. Please let me out.
Thank you. Cool. What we saw there was the story trailer for Zombie Army VR, a game that Rebellion and XR Games have created. Before we get into that, just a little quick introduction for myself. My name's Bobby Tandy. I'm the founder and CEO of XR Games. We are a VR game studio who have been around since 2017. We've shipped 8 VR titles so far. We currently have 3 in development, and this one, Zombie Army, has been announced. What I would like to do now is just to talk a little bit more about XR Games. So people ask, what is the secret sauce of XR Games? And I believe our secret sauce is that we can take well-known IP, such as Zombie Army, such as Zombieland, or Angry Birds, previous titles we've done, and break down the core DNA of what this IP is. And we take that and build a VR game from the ground up that resonates well with audiences. So when audiences play our VR games, they feel as though they've stepped into the universe. They feel as though they're one of the characters. They feel part of this game. All that said, what I'd like to do now is hand over to Jordan for you to introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name's Jordan Woodward. I'm the head of design at Rebellion. Rebellion's a game studio and publisher based in the UK. We have 4 studios across the UK, and we develop our own IP. And we also work with developers such as XR Games to publish our IP on other platforms such as virtual reality.
Fantastic. So this isn't the first Rebellion franchise to come to VR. Following the success of Sniper Elite VR, did VR also feel like such an obvious medium for Zombie Army?
Yeah, they're very similar games because they share a lot of the same DNA. So the Zombie Army universe started out almost as an alternate universe or parallel universe to our Sniper Elite series. So the Zombie Army universe, it's essentially a sort of alternate universe as if World War II continued. And the story is that the Germans were losing the war.
Right.
They were desperate, and they harnessed satanic occult energy to raise their army back from the dead and continue the war. So Zombie Army VR is set between our Zombie Army trilogy game and Zombie Army 4. And it explores the storyline in between. So yeah, it's a very, very sort of obvious and natural fit for us to bring Zombie Army also to VR as we did with Sniper Elite.
Fantastic. There are lots of exciting new features in the Zombie Army VR that are only possible because of advances in VR technology. So if you think about the PSVR 2 headset, we have enhanced haptic feedback in the head, two-handed melee combat, adaptive triggers. How do these features, technological features, enhance the experience for actual VR players?
Yeah, so I mean, it puts you right in the action. That's kind of a special thing about VR. It puts you really in the game world in first person, and the sort of interactivity with things like the haptic triggers allow you to use things like with our authentic rifles, you get to feel for each rifle the feedback as you pull the trigger. We get to harness that you're essentially where you're taking damage is your head, it's you. So we get to play around with that a little bit and the feedback on the headsets. And also, obviously, interactivity with your hands, which in VR, it's basically what it feels intuitive and just feels right to the player. So a lot of the gameplay and the game development is based around just what feels intuitive and feels natural and feels right as a person holding a rifle. Even if you've never held a rifle before, you've seen enough movies and played enough games, you know how that sort of should feel. And yeah, that's what's kind of special about a lot of the VR features.
Fantastic. And as a head of design at Rebellion, when you've been given the PSVR 2 headset and it has a headset rumble, like when you're thinking through your process of when should we activate that for the player to make them feel more immersed in the game, what's that thought process like, out of interest? Pretty sure that wasn't a question on the script, but just put you on the spot.
No, I think it's that like like I said, where it feels intuitive or feels natural. Obviously, the feedback, it's when like you're surrounded by enemies, like a zombie, when they have a reach to reach out and hit you, it needs to connect with you. So that's very different to when you're playing like a third-person game, because you have that sort of, in a third-person game, you have that more awareness, visibility around you. But with like a VR title, you know, you might be getting hit out of view from the side, and you'll notice more in VR and in that first-person view if it doesn't feel quite right, because it's more you in the world.
Fantastic.
So I think that's when you take a lot of it into account in that regard.
Fantastic. And then thinking about features themselves, when designing and developing a game, we can have ideas at the beginning of our assumptions of what would be fun. But during the course of development, as always, things come up that you don't expect. So out of interest, when QA are reviewing the game and they're flagging bugs that to be fixed, were there any instances where you thought, you know what, that might be a bug, but let's look into that. Maybe it should become a feature of the game?
Yeah, all the time. So when we were working with your head of design, Chris Cook, we've had so many conversations over the course of development about this sort of thing where, you know, QA might raise a bug during development. One example is essentially when you're using a shotgun and it's a two-handed weapon, and we balanced it really early on, balanced it right for being a two-handed shotgun.
Right.
And sort of middle of development, we were playing it and playtesting it, and you're seeing people run around like taking influence from like Terminator style with a shotgun, like all in one hand, but then also because we've got dual wielding, you've got people picking up their pistol, also using their shotgun at the same time, or picking up a sledgehammer and hitting an enemy and then using the shotgun. And it was never really designed from the paper design to be used one-handed. But it feels super cool and badass. So with that sort of thing, you just lean into it a bit. Like if it's fun for the player and feels really cool to do, we try to lean a little bit into that fun, even if it wasn't the original intention. And I guess we have to balance that a little bit with the authenticity of the world and the weapon design, because we're a game based in World War II. But I think because we're a bit more alternate universe, we afford ourselves a little bit more flexibility with those sorts of decisions.
So in that instance, if you've got both hands on there, you're more accurate, there's less recoil. But if you're doing it one-handed, I guess you're less accurate and a bit more recoil, just to make it feel more...
Exactly, yeah. And to be honest, like obviously if you're holding two weapons, you can't reload. So you're going to have to trade that off anyway. So I think that's when you could argue some of these situations are overpowered, but then they're not really, because there's that two-handed trade-off.
Fantastic. Let's discuss about some specific challenges in creating Zombie Army VR. when you're trying to bring the essence of the flat screen to VR, such as the hallmark kill cam that Rebellion is very well is famous for. What did you feel as though the biggest challenges in going from flat screen to VR while staying true to the original IP?
Yeah, I guess there's a few considerations. So for those that aren't familiar, when you, in Sniper Elite and Zombie Army, when you make an impressive kill, we essentially create an in-game cutscene that follows the trail of a bullet through the enemy and rewards you for that impressive kill. Now, in the flat screen games, I think if you talk about the technology as one aspect of that, so in console, like say you're talking about Xbox, you're comparing like an Xbox to a Quest. The technology is very different, and in the console versions, you can see the full environment around you. We're rendering the whole environment in real time. Right. You know, we're tailoring the VR version of the game for the platform, so we're actually we're masking a lot of the environment out in that regard. So we have to think about the optimization and the technological aspects of that as well when we're looking at all the different platforms we're bringing it to. I'd say that becomes one of the technical challenges, or obviously one of the challenges of bringing games to VR. But we also have to think a lot about comfort as well. So VR, one of the main challenges is about moving the character. If usually as where you're standing, when you might be playing in VR, you might be standing still, and might take control away from you and move you as a camera, and that can feel quite nauseating or uncomfortable.
Definitely.
So we have to have quite a careful balance to get that right, and also provide a whole suite of comfort options for people playing the games. So we have to consider that we don't know the environment you're playing the game in. So you might be seated, you might be standing. We have to give you options for that, and also preferences on, say, like movement styles. So we'll give you like free movement or teleport movement, and for the kill cams, we'll let you turn them fully off. So those are just some examples, I guess, of how we let you customize the experience to suit you and the environment you're playing in.
Fantastic, and you know, it does make you feel like a badass when you trigger the kill cam. You can see the bullet go through the target and go inside the body, and it's absolutely a fantastic feeling for sure. Just one thought that occurred to me: I've never actually played it. Well, I've done the kill cam, and you obviously go out of the body, you trace the bullet, and see the action. It feels fantastic. When you're in co-op mode, how does that kind of play out in real time? Does the person you're playing with see that happen, or they'll just see the bullet and that's it?
Yeah, I mean, you get your local kill cam, so it doesn't take your co-op partner out of the game. But co-op's an interesting aspect of. We support two-player co-op as well, so that's where a lot of the socialization elements come into play. Yeah.
Fantastic. With regards to other challenges that you may have faced apart from kill cam, is there anything else that you were thinking of that were challenges going from flat screen to VR?
I don't know what I've got on my list there. What have we got?
So, for example, when you think about how the movies or more recently the games influence how people expect you to hold the weapons or use the weapons to stay true to the heritage of the weapon, so to speak, in terms of how it's reloaded and
absolutely.
Very different on flat screen, I guess, when you're doing pressing keyboards.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, obviously, in a lot of the flat screen games, there's you have a heads-up display to do a lot of the work for you in terms of like messaging the feedback to the player. So when developing the game for VR, we have to stay true to the flat screen game version, but present it in a way that feels intuitive and works well in VR, specifically for the platform. So we're taking the hood away. Health's a really good example where the hood is completely gone, so everything has to be more in-world diegetic. We've got a combo counter as well that would have been kind of in the top corner of the screen. So we have to find a place for that now. And for us, what felt right for that in the end was on your wrist as a watch.
Right.
That works really well for a number of reasons. it's one, you're using your gun in your hand, so it's in your peripheral vision, so you can always see it or very quickly see it.
Yeah.
And also, yeah, you can just very quickly kind of check that you're not doing like a complex action to get your feedback on what your score is, or you don't have to pause the game to find these things out.
Fantastic. And you mentioned co-op there. What's some of your favorite moments in co-op? So, for example, you know, I have friends scattered around the globe. It's difficult to get together in real life, but what I find in playing this game and other VR titles is that sense of presence is amazing, where it genuinely feels as though we're together doing something. Just out of interest, what are your favorite moments when you're in co-op playing these games?
Yeah, co-op was a really important aspect. So it's an important aspect of Zombie Army in the universe. Zombie Army 4 supports 4-player co-op. So it's really important for us to also bring co-op to Zombie Army VR. And really important for the socialization aspect and working together as a team.
Right.
And I feel like we're using things like the hand gestures.
Right.
You can use those to communicate with like as you would communicate with a person you're actually fighting zombies next to. So you can use the hand gestures to point out a target and talk to each other to talk about the target you want to prioritize, which for so Zombie Army VR is largely a game about a mixed horde of different enemy types, like an enemy type that will soak up a lot of ammo, a sniper, an enemy that runs at you and explodes next to you, and then a bunch of standard grunts. So you're trying to, in the moment, prioritize all these targets and overcome the overwhelming nature of this slow-moving horde. And if you don't prioritize correctly and you don't communicate correctly with your friends,
right,
you're really quickly going to get into trouble. So in co-op, a lot of this comes across really well, that you can just point out targets with your friends and talk to each other and decide how you're going to deal with this threat together.
Fantastic. And how does VR help create more immersive experience for the fans? So from a design perspective, do you find the pacing to be the same in a flat screen game versus a VR game? Because I genuinely feel my heart rate increasing and rushing when you feel as though you're overcome by the zombies, but your friends just managed to take one out whilst you may have struggled with a VR bit, and then the waves come in, you manage to get them, whether it's a sniper or a tanker or some other enemy type. But once that wave comes over, then you kind of get a moment to breathe, and you get the pacing, it allows you kind of up and down. But how do you tackle that from a design perspective versus flat screen versus VR?
Yeah, it definitely feels a lot more intense when you're in VR. You forget where you are. You with a headset on, you definitely feel more in the world, and I guess your senses are heightened as well. Kind of at that point, you're really focused in. So when you're surrounded by zombies, you really feel that sort of intensity compared to when you're kind of playing on a flat screen game. But we also take a lot of that into consideration with our level design and environment design as well. So we'll create probably more claustrophobic spaces to increase that feeling.
Especially in the trenches, right?
Yeah, like when you're hemmed into a World War II trench and you've got enemies coming down the trench or coming from side routes or dropping in overhead as well. you really start to quickly feel like you're like hemmed in and backing up against the wall, and you're physically doing these things as well. Like, 'cause you might be standing and physically doing these things, so you really do feel that extra intensity.
100%, and I can feel myself sweating thinking back to those moments, especially during the ploy testing when there may be too many zombies, too few zombies. In terms of that, how do you approach user testing in terms of, you can make assumptions, you'll get really good at the first level and you don't want to make it too difficult or too easy. What's Rebellion's ethos to kind of get that right balance out of interest?
Yes, there's a hell of a lot of playtest and iteration, and just talking about the experiences. And then, over time, I guess we don't try and necessarily nail like a steady difficulty curve. We're more just focusing on the fun and a variety of experiences. So as long as we're getting variety across, and while you're playing through the game, you're getting different experiences.
Yes.
And we're mixing up the composition of the enemies and the waves, and you're having fun with it, and you're steadily finding new weapons and ways of dealing with the horde. We're not necessarily worrying so much about, like, is this level harder than the last level?
Fantastic. Thinking with an eye to the future, what do you think fans can expect from VR in the future?
I think obviously the technology is going to keep developing. We're already seeing a lot more mixed reality experiences, and I feel like it's just going to. It's not at a point yet where it's fully comfortable to wear the headsets for a long time. So Zombie Army, it's a full campaign game. It's sort of 8 hours plus long with replayability, a lot of replayability built in.
Yeah.
But we've built it in such a way that while you're playing it, you can play for sort of the level is about an average of 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So again, when we talk about comfortability, that allows you those points where you can comfortably get a good experience and maybe come away from that and come back to it, or you can play it for much longer. So I feel like we're just going to see a lot more comfortability, I think, built into a lot of the headsets, which are going to allow people to play for a lot longer and play for longer sessions.
Fantastic. And
how about yourself?
yeah, if you look at titles such as Assassin's Creed, Asgard's Wrath 2, they've got 15 hours gameplay, 50 plus hours gameplay. People have definitely found their VR legs, and as the headsets become more comfortable and lighter to wear and the batteries last longer, I think we will be spending more time in there for sure. And getting a peek at future headsets coming down the line, they are definitely getting lighter, more comfortable to wear, and developers themselves are getting better at creating experiences that don't make you feel nauseous, don't make you feel sick, make the experiences more engaging, especially with all the social features as well. You want to hang out with your friends. So I think the playtimes will be getting longer as the technology gets better for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually a really good point about the curve of VR development. I think a lot earlier on, we saw a lot more like smaller experiences that were more prototypey. People were trying to figure out VR.
Yes.
And what made a good VR experience. And I think we are getting to that point now where there are, like with a lot of game development on other platforms, a lot of people are finding their feet and they're learning like consistent lessons.
100%, and that goes for well-established studios such as ourselves, and it's also to see great indie success as well. So there's a game called Gorilla Tag that was on App Lab, made by one developer, and the movements as a gorilla, putting your hands on the floor, and you're essentially playing TIG, and it had absolute monster success on App Lab, to the point where it made across to the main store. So it's fantastic to see games made by solo indie developers as well as well-established developers as well, and I think that's the beauty of a new medium such as VR. It's a free-for-all in the sense that everyone's trying to figure out what works well and what doesn't work well, and everyone has the opportunity to succeed as well. Fantastic. That's the end of our discussion, our fireside chat, but we'd like to hand it over to the audience if there's any questions from anybody.
Hi. Do anybody have any questions? Please raise your hand. Nobody? Well,
cool.
Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much for coming, guys, and a big applause.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we will be back in a little bit. Thank you.